Of Reddit, what was your worst run-in with a creep? There was a creepy hunched old man who used to come into a pub I worked at. He used to say and do slightly weird things, and then one day he called one of the glass collectors fat. She was 16 at the time, and to apologize he went to fist bump her, then grabbed her hand and put her fingers in his mouth. I was 19, worked at a main library in my city, with several floors and an elevator. I was taking a book truck. The library guard got on. As soon as the door closed he cornered me and kissed me. He was at least 40 and much bigger than me. I never got on an elevator alone with him again, nor with anyone else that I didn't know. So, last year I got a flat tire on a semi-busy road right when a snowstorm started. Since I had AAA, I figured I would use one of my roadside assistants to have them replace the tire with a spare that I had, and I wouldn't have to go outside since I forgot gloves. While I was waiting, a mid-40s early 50s man came up to my window and asked if I needed help. Thinking that he was just a good Samaritan at the time, I thanked him but told him, no, I was just waiting for AAA. Now, if he left here, I would have a nice story about a guy willing to help me with a car problem. Instead, he gets downright pushy. He lives nearby. I can just take my car there and change it in his garage. Why don't I just stay in his house until AAA comes? I kept telling him no until he starts yelling, and I rolled up the window and he starts pounding on it. Eventually he left when the AAA guy came, but I still took a very long and circuitous route home. A few years ago I lived in a tiny condo right next to a few trails in San Diego. I was on a pretty strict running and hiking routine. One night it got dark faster than expected. A man who appeared to be about 6'3" and 200 pounds approached me as I was nearing the end of my hike. He told me, with a smirk on his face, to be careful as there are many things that could hurt me when the sun goes down. The next day as I'm exiting my back gate he's standing there as if he's waiting for me. He introduced himself and admitted he's been watching me for a while. I decided to pretend like I was grabbing something from my car and went back into my house. For the next few days I see this guy circling my condo, looking in if the curtains are open. He was always walking around day and night. I checked the Megan's Law website and surprise, there he was. Multiple charges including rape by force or fear and child pornography. I decided to contact his parole officer and he immediately returned my call, stated he could tell I fit his MO and to use extreme caution. He said he would do what he could to get him out of the neighborhood. After that call I thankfully never saw him again. I was 8 years old and waiting for the bus in the morning to go to my mom's work. A guy sat next to me at the bus stop and his bus pass was the wrong color, expired. He told me he loved me, and as scary as it is, I said thank you. When the bus finally came, I got on first and the bus driver lady immediately shut the door behind me. She said the man knelt down to try and look up my shorts and that he wouldn't be taking the bus with us. I told my mom and after work we went and bought me my first pepper spray. As a fucking 8-year-old. 14 years old and alone on the subway, man sits in a seat across from me, spreads his legs and starts masturbating through his pants while staring me straight in the eyes. I was getting ready to jump up and run out at the next stop. An older gentleman suddenly appeared, stood directly in front of me like a shield and stared the guy down. At the next stop he pointed to the door and made him get off. I hope I said thank you, but I was in shock. So thank you, dear man who protected me and made me feel safe. Used to work with this old man that would touch me all the time on my arm or my back. It's hard for me to make a scene, although I wish that I had been direct with him. My solution was to shuffle away from him anytime he got close to me. It did seem to fix it, but he was kind of a dick afterwards. Also same job. I was kissed on the neck by another co-worker very suddenly. This guy was not from the US, so I chalked it up to cultural differences, but I did not view him the same way afterwards. Weird Larry lived in my dorm. He unsuccessfully hit on all the girls, which is why he was Weird Larry. It totally ruined his self-esteem. One night, Larry just showed up and invited himself into my room. I was not fully clothed. He took this as an invitation and climbed up into my bunk bed. I asked him to get down, and he asked me to come up there with him so we could have sex. When I refused, he took some quarters out of his pocket, put them on my nightstand and said, "What if I paid you? You could do your laundry." I told him that wasn't enough change to do a full load of laundry, and he started crying and getting snot all over my pillow. I had to go wake up the RD, person in charge of the dorm, and have him escorted out. Then he wouldn't stop sending me messages. They became more desperate, until they became threats at rape. I saved the messages and used them to file a restraining order. A few other girls wanted in on it, so Weird Larry was evicted from his own dormitory and had to drop out of school. TLDR, came into my dorm room uninvited, then gave me some quarters and told me he was paying me for sex. Then he cried when I said no, wound up needing a restraining order. When I delivered pizzas and I was 18, this guy asked me if I wanted to step in while he grabbed his money. It was cold and rainy, so I took him up on the offer. He ended up trying to keep me there till his mom got home because he didn't have enough for the pizza. He tried to force me into a pyramid scheme and kept making uncomfortable comments about me. I had left my phone in my car, so I couldn't text my manager to call me to give me an out because no matter how hard I tried to leave, this guy would find some way to block my path. I took off when he went to the bathroom and told my manager about what happened. Females weren't allowed to deliver to him anymore. We eventually found out he was a convicted sex offender too. Normally I find an out and I always have an escape plan, but I put myself in a position where I couldn't give myself an escape. I went on to manage/deliver pizzas for several years, but after that day I implemented a new rule, which was, never enter anyone's home unless I knew who it was. I'd stand in the pouring rain any day over entering a stranger's home. I come from a safe low crime area, but my gut instinct that night was that I was in danger. It's a tie. Outside of a string of bars, a drunk man yelled, "You're my type." Then ran up, bear hugged me, picked me up and wouldn't let me go. My male friends intervened and somehow the guy fell over and took me down with him and still wouldn't let go. I was so shocked that I didn't fight back, but I wish I would have. The other was a guy who followed me into my apartment building lobby and wouldn't leave. He was under the impression that he was going to be invited to my place. I got rid of him by giving him a fake phone number. "I'm sorry, random person who likely received texts from the creep." The most memorable was when I was sitting in my parents' front garden, on the swing, reading. The way everything is laid out with the trees and whatnot, you can barely see the swing/deck/barbecue area from any perspective that's not from the front door. Very private spot. Anyway, I was just sitting there reading when I hear someone walking up. Assume it's a family member because how would it not be? Someone plops down on the swing next to me, throws an arm around me, and it's just some fucking guy. Says some stuff, tries to move closer and proceeds to attempt to keep me from leaving. When I get up, I GTFO of there, practically sprint back to the house and tell my dad what just happened and that there's some asshole in our garden being completely gross at me. He just laughs and says, "Oh, that's just new across the street neighbor." Be nice, the fuck? Over the next couple of years, shithead would go on to make me and my older, only occasionally visiting, sisters super uncomfortable any chance he got. Long stories. And his poor, but large and angry, dog was always loose in the neighborhood and murdering other people's pets. That motherfucker still makes my blood boil. I was walking my dog and made the mistake of not rushing home. Once it got dark, a man in a baseball cap and oversized jacket blocked my path to comment how pretty my dog was and how I must take good care of him. I smiled, tightly, and thanked him. Told him to have a good day and nodded and went to go around him, so he naturally grabbed my arm and said, "Yeah, I bet you take real good care of anything you have. You married?" I lied and said yes. He let me go but followed me home. I wound up calling my boyfriend to come pick me up. A guy saw me in the metro and thought I was cute, which meant he had to follow me on my 5 kilometers walk home to my flat in the middle of the night. He introduced himself to me as I was about to put in the key to my door. When I was 13, a 50-something-year-old man said in front of my mother that if I ever misbehaved he would give me a spanking, kinda out of the blue. Then when her attention was averted he kinda snuck a hug for a few seconds too long. Nothing super crazy but, hell awkward. Guy used to come into the comic book store where I worked, and he had a crush on me. I tried to send clear signals I wasn't interested and several other people told him I wasn't interested. He would always tickle my waist, so I established a no touching rule. He respected the rule, but gave me a hard time about why it only applied to him. Answer: nobody else was groping me. If you don't grope me you're allowed to touch my shoulder or shake my damn hand. He ended up asking me out 3 times, and I turned him down 3 times. He then started walking and punching his fist into his palm and saying things like all women deserve to be punished. Several times, he also lied to everybody else he knew who went to the store, a lot of people. He was a gamer there, telling them I was really vain and I thought he was interested in me, but actually I was the one who was misreading the situation. Creep. In 5th grade, after ballet practice, I was only wearing shorts and a jacket over my dance clothes, leotard and tights, and standing in a Chipotle line. Some old dude was behind me and asking me about my phone. According to my mother, he was looking at my body, scanning it up and down. Even before I found that out he gave me the creeps. When we left, he rushed to pick up his order and ran out the door after us and followed us home. He stopped following at the last turn. I had trouble sleeping. I was 14 and had a run-in with a school creep in the grade above me. Every girl had a story about him, some much worse than others, but I didn't know who he was at the time. We were both at an after-school function and I fell off a table I tried to sit on top of. He caught me, and while asking if I was okay in a concerned voice, I noticed that his hand bracing my chest was subtly trying to pull down the zipper on my hoodie. He also tried to steal my money at a different school function some years later. I had to give him my money to buy pizza for the event and he pretended to forget about giving me the rest of the change, which was a lot. He pretended like it was a joke after I grilled him to cough it up. True scum of the earth. Lived in a super cheap, super shitty apartment when I was in college. It was a decent city but the apartment was located in the only bad neighborhood. I was willing to deal with it for $300 per month rent. Because of the price, people constantly moved in and then bailed after a month or two. One of these people was an older, 50s, 60s, veteran. He seemed polite at first, but after he had been there a few days I'd catch him weirdly leaning to watch me from behind a wall when I'd be outside. When my boyfriend wasn't around, he'd wait for me to be outside and then run up to start a conversation. The conversations were usually harmless at first, then would get creepy like asking what my favorite sex position is and other inappropriate questions. About 2 months in, I was leaving my house at like 10 p.m. and I saw him stumbling around the parking lot covered in blood. I quickly left, and never saw him again. However, a few days later my landlord knocked on my door and was pale in the face. He asked me if I had seen anything unusual with the guy. I explained that I had, and asked why. He said that if I ever see him on the property again, I need to call the cops first and then call him. It took some prying to find out why, and he told me that he just went in to clean out his apartment and all that the guy had in his house was a dirty mattress, a broken toaster, and a full-on sex dungeon. I don't know what all that entailed, but he mentioned the place was full of bondage and restraint type things. It still makes my skin crawl to think about it. Made eye contact with a guy across the street, smiled at him to be polite. He followed me home without me realizing it and spent the next few days stalking me, following me when I left the house, leaving notes on my front door, etc. Had to get the cops involved. I was walking to the train station at 9 p.m. in a very isolated area. No one was around. 2 men were following me as I'm sure they knew I was going to the train station and in order to get there, I had to go through a dark alley. They were 2 huge men and I was shorter and also a minor, which was obvious cause I had a backpack. They started trying to corner me and then they asked questions about where I live and if I live in the area and then a big family came and the men left. Not the worst but a random old man on the street asked if I was a virgin when I was like 17, although I looked more like 14. I've met many creeps, but the one that immediately came to mind is the dude that put his hand down the front of my pants at a concert. He tried to play it off like it was an accident. Things get pretty crowded in the pit, so it's not like there's any personal space but hand down my pants there's no way that's an accident. He was with who I presume was his girlfriend and when I turned around to be like WTF she glared at me like I was trying to hit on him. So yeah. Probably the guy that sexually assaulted me in front of his girlfriend. This happened back in the summer of 2017. I was walking to work and was about half a mile away and it was around 8:45 a.m. This guy in a car slowed down next to me and asked where I was going and if I needed a ride. I politely said no and just kept walking. The dude fucking followed me all the way driving slow and kept asking over and over if he could give me a ride. I said no several more times then just ignored him. Luckily the way to my work was a heavy traffic area with other people walking around. I was 22 at the time of this story and this guy was likely twice my age. I'm also a somewhat petite woman who acts a bit younger than I am. I used to work with this chef who halfway through my employment started asking somewhat creepy and personal questions. The one that set off alarms was when he asked me in the middle of a shift what are your cravings? I, being somewhat normal, assumed he meant food. He didn't mean food. A few months later, I found myself alone with him. We were looking for something in the kitchen, and he suddenly asked me what kind of car do you drive, followed by do you live alone? It didn't feel normal at all. I've been living with my parents rather than an apartment and innocently answered as much. His whole demeanor and mood changed like I flipped some kind of switch. He asked if and when I planned to move out and suddenly became disinterested in me after I said I had no plans. Never spoke to me again after that. Then quarantine happened and he apparently quit. I hope I never see him again. Right after I got my engagement ring, a man approached me while I was walking home. He was in a car, and asked if I wanted to go get drinks. I said no, obviously. He asked why. I told him I was engaged, not that it should matter. But in my experience stating that you are in a relationship diffuses the situation better than just saying you are not interested and I was already getting sketch vibes. He got pissed, started yelling and asking why I thought my fiancé was better than him. I didn't even know him, how dare I not even give him a chance, accusing my fiancé of abusing me and not letting me have friends, etc. I tried to turn around and walk back towards where I came from and he threw his car in reverse to continue to yell at me. I've been catcalled and harassed before, but this was the first time I actually felt like my life 100% in danger. Also I had an older co-worker who would accidentally show up to places where he knew I would go often. I couldn't prove it, but there was no way it was coincidence. He also said people at the gym and grocery store would ask him why I wasn't going to those places anymore. I changed my schedule to reduce the risk of running into him, but that makes no sense because no one would think to ask him. I'm pretty sure he was asking people there if they saw me recently. The first time I can remember being uncomfortable by a guy was when I was 10. I was riding in the front seat of my mom's car when a semi pulls up next to us. I was wearing shorts so my legs were visible to the semi driver. He starts honking at us and so we speed up thinking that he wants to get over. He speeds up too and stays side by side with us, continuing to honk at us just because he can see my bare legs. This is a current situation. I work at a breakfast restaurant and we have this other gentleman, 50 to 60, and the first time I ever talked to him he told me a story about his penis, how he wants Halle Berry as a sex slave, then said that if people don't laugh at his jokes they need to get a sense of humor. I avoid him as much as possible now. Thanks for listening. Subscribe for more daily videos.